Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I'm Reed, and today we are going to be going over chapters 40 and 41 of the Dragonbone share. We are getting nearer to the end. In the mass market version, just from the beginning of chapter 40, we have just about 90 pages left in the book. So the end is coming, we're nearly there. And by the end of these two chapters, we've got just about 50 pages. So both these chapters combined are about 40 pages. So we open with Joshua, Daernoth, Isorn. So many of these men are having a conversation that something has been brought forward to the table. Elias is out there, kind of as the walls of Naglamond are about to be besieged. And Elias is treating Joshua to say, hey, like, come on, meeting under a flag of truce. And they think it's a trap. They're like, you remember Elias? He had you put in the cell. Joshua's convinced, the old, it's a character trait like that. Even though a character is bad, others can sense that there's still a little bit of good within them. Isorn is incredibly irritated, but Daernoth says, no, I will go. And Isorn says, yeah, I'll go too, because Isorn, doesn't like it, but he has to go along with it. Because, he only trusts himself. Daernoth only trusts himself to be there for Joshua in case anything should go awry. Then we go to the Hernestiri court, that storyline with Megwin and Eolair and King Luth. King Luth, of course, was wounded, and he seems to be not in a great place. And Eolair informs her that Scully has come to them, and Megwin believes that he's coming to try to force the Hernestiri to surrender, but Eolair says no, there's a little more to it than just that. And so they go out, and says, I offer you hostages in return for information about the wizard's boy and princess. And again, Megwin is kind of far away. She can't really hear, so it's kind of coming in waves. If you do not tell us where the princess is, we will just ... these hostages. And Megwin is convinced that it is Scully himself. And Sifka, I believe one of her servant girls, is one of the hostages. And Eolair doesn't know. He doesn't know who Simon is. He knows who Miriamel is. But again, they don't know where they are. And so they weren't killed. The hostages weren't killed. But it says when it was opened, let me rephrase that. I read a little too far ahead here. So they waited. So Scully left a gift for Megwin. So they waited an hour before making their way cautiously down the bank, moving as watchfully as a doe crossing a clearing. Reaching the bottom of the Moir Broch, they scuttled to the black wrapped bundle Scully had left behind. When it was open, the men cried out in horror and wept, great racking sobs of helpless grief. But Megwin did not shed a tear even when she saw what Scully and his butchers had done to her brother Gwithin before he died. When Aelair put an arm around her shoulders to help her away from the blood-soaked blanket, she shook him off angrily, then turned and slapped hard at his cheek. He did not protect himself, but only stared at her. The tears that filled his eyes, she knew, were not from the blow, and in that moment it made her hate him all the more. But her own eyes remained dry. So Gwithin, of course, a couple chapters ago, told Joshua, told the people in Naglamund, I can't stay here, I need to go and try to help win back the fight for Hernastir. And we see, unfortunately, where that got Gwithin. So then we go to Simon and Jariki and Benebik and Sludig and Haston and all those guys. I think I'll just be referring to them as all those guys. And they're entering into one of the final phases of their journey, and certainly by the end of chapter 41, they're at the cusp of that final stage. Jariki has elected for somebody to stay behind with the horses, and the rest of them will go forward. And it just says here, there was always cold. Now, every long night, every dreary white day, bitter, biting cold. The snow flew continuously into Simon's face, stinging his eyes, burning and cracking his lips. His face reddened painfully, as if he had been gone too long in the sun, and he could hardly hold the reins of his horse for shivering. It was like being thrown out of doors forever, a punishment that had gone on too long. Still, there was nothing he could do to remedy the situation but offer silent prayers to Osiris each day for the strength to last until camp was made. And so they move forward. And they reach, I believe it's an abbey. And they find the key, or where the spot where the first boats from Rimmersgard came along. The mounds of the last ships. So a little bit of a perspective of history for them almost. And there's tension between Sludig and Jariki. Jariki tells him, what you do not tell is how your Rimmersgard people came to this land only to drive others from it. And Sludig says, I cannot undo what my ancestors have done. And Jariki says, as far as I am concerned, you and your high king may grind each other to dust. And Benebik says, with respectfulness, you are not examining the full truth. If it was only the struggling of mortal kings and princes that concerned us, we would all of us be defending Naglamund. You know that we five at least are having other goals. And he says, why should we take the side of upstart men against our kin when once we walked together beneath the sun coming out of the ultimate east? What allegiance could we possibly owe to mortals who have destroyed us as eagerly as they destroy all else, even themselves? And the one you whisperingly call the Storm King, he whose name is Inuluki, even his name is fearsome. He was the best of us once, beautiful to see, wise far beyond the understanding of mortals, bright, burning as a flame. If he is now a thing of dark horror, cold and hateful, who is the fault? If now bodiless and vengeful, he schemes to brush mankind from the face of his land, like dust from a page, why should we not rejoice? It was not Inuluki who drove us into exile so that we must hide among Ildhuerte's dark trees like deer wary of also discovery. What have mortals ever brought to us but suffering? He has a point. So we go, after they sing a song, we go to the meeting. And Priorites is there, interestingly enough. And Elias is there along with his sword, Sorrow. And he says, "So, brother, you are looking well." "As you are not," Joshua said flatly. "You called for the parley, Elias. What do you want?" He says, "My daughter, I want my daughter. There is another too, a boy, but he is less important. No, it is Miriamel I chiefly want. If you hand her over to me, I will give my word of safe conduct to all children and women folk in Aglamond. Otherwise, everybody behind the walls will die." And Joshua says, "I don't have her." And of course, Elias believes that he is lying, even though Joshua is telling the truth. He doesn't know where she is. And Joshua says, "Please, Elias, turn back only from the course you have chosen. Send that cursed sword back to those unholy ones who would poison you and Osten, and I will lay my life in your hands. I will open Naglamund's gates to you as a maiden unshuts her window for a lover. I will turn every stone in heaven and earth to find Miriamel. Throw away the sword, Elias. Throw it away. Not by accident was it named Sorrow." And Priorites freaks out and rushes forward. And Joshua is overcome with anger, and he just says, "Go to your hiding hole, traitor. Liar, liar. I will shake it down around your ears. I will ruin you so completely," Elias thundered, squirming in his chair as Joshua walked to the tent door, "that God all-powerful will search 1,000 years and never find even your soul." And that is the end of chapter 40. But of course, this is a double reading episode, so we go right into chapter 41, Cold Fire and Grudging Stone. And Daernoth has a dream of like an ox pulling a cart, this rumbling, but then he wakes up. It's like that thing where something is actually happening around you while you're sleeping, but you start to dream what's happening or dream of a sound, and then you wake up and you fully come to your senses and realize what is going on. Daernoth wakes up to realize that the siege of Naglamund has begun. He says, "Ho, Naglamunders, now the test. God love us, now the test." So they go out onto the wall, and they find 6 siege towers, it says, their wooden summits fully as high as Naglamund's mighty curtain wall. Hung all over in dark hides, they slouched forward like tree-tall, square-headed bears. The grunts and cries of the hidden men who pushed them, and the screech of the wheels, big as houses, seemed the voices of monsters unseen since the eldest days. Isorn is up there on the wall with him. And Isorn says that the prince is coming. He has been with Yarnaga and the archive master since you returned from the parley. He's in conversation with them. And now they have brought ladders against the wall. And now the battle has begun. It says, and Daernoth leads the charge. For Joshua, he shouted, leaping forward. The men behind him echoed his cry. They came against the besiegers with a tinny crash of sword on sword, and for a moment pushed the shiremen back. One toppled from the walls, shrieking, windmilling his arms as though the chill wind might bear him up. Grimston's men took heart and pushed forward. And the Grimstead, the knight, kind of limps over to stand behind Daernoth, and he says, "'Tis 7 here, and 6 more tumbled off the ladder. All down the wall it's the same, losing far more than we, King Elias, is, far more." But Daernoth knows the logistics of what is before them, that even though Naglamund can maybe hold fast for a little bit, they can't hold fast for long. He just says, the king has far more than we do. Then we go to Yarnaga and Father Strangyard. as they read about Prester John in the Hayholt and coming across the dragon Shurikai. And Stringard is confused. He says, "What use is this?" And he mentions those few who remained at the cave mouth. This itself an indication of great bravery, for who could know what might happen at the door of an angered dragon's tunnel, swore great oaths of joy and astonishment. Joy when they saw John of Warriston come up alive from the worm's den, and astonishment at the massive claw, crimson-scaled and hook-taloned, that he bore upon his bloody shoulder. As they went shouting down the road before him, leading his horse triumphantly through the gates of Irchester, the people came gaping to their windows and into the streets. Some say that those who had loudest prophesied John's horrible death and the dire consequences to themselves of the young knight's actions were now most audible in their acclaim of his great deed. As word spread, the rows were quickly lined with clamoring citizens who threw flowers before John as he rode, bright nail lifted high before him like a torch flame to the city that was now his own. Then we go back to Daernoth, or back to Joshua, and he brings up a troop of guards, and it just says his sword was like, I love this, a ray of sunlight flickering through leaves, snicking swiftly in and out, making dead men from living, while his attackers swung clumsy broadswords or inadequate daggers. That's such a good sentence. And Elias's forces begin to fall back. It's like, all right, like they're gaining momentum here. And then they throw up some oil slicks onto the walls and light them with flaming arrows. And it says just here, because this is just a kind of almost a haunting sentence. When King Elias rode out from the camp, wrapped in his great black cloak like a man of shadows, Nagleman's defenders jeered. When he lifted his strange gray sword and shouted like a madman for rain to fall and quench the fiery towers, they laughed uneasily. It was only after a while, as the king rode back and forth, crow-black cape flapping in the cold wind, that they began to understand from the horrible anger in Elias's echoing voice that he truly expected rain to come at his summoning, and that he was outraged it had not. The laughter faded into a fearful silence. Nagleman's defenders, one by one, left off their celebrating and climbed down from the walls to tend their wounds. The siege, after all, had barely begun. There was no respite in view, and no rest this side of heaven. We go back to Simon and all those guys, and Simon asks Benedict if Ineliki is the devil. He says, I suppose it's just that I see him in my dreams. I think it's him anyways. Red eyes, that's all I see really, and everything else is black. And he's worried about the dragon, but the dragon in the mountain with him they're going to, that's such a far-off story. And Simon thinks to himself, why am I here? Why are any of us here? Searching through this horrible snow for some sword no one has even thought about in years. Meanwhile, the princess and the rest of them are back at the castle waiting for the king to attack. Stupid. Benedict grew up in the mountains in the snow. Grimric and Haston and Sludic are soldiers. The Aiden alone knows what the Scythi want, so why am I here? It's stupid. So Simon, he kind of reverts back to his old self of thinking things are stupid, not understanding, but it makes sense. He doesn't understand. He's not, in many respects, he is a peer of the men that he is with, and in other respects, he is not. And Jariki points to the ring that Morghenus, or that Morghenus sent to Benedict, and Jariki asks him, so you are one of your kind who knows the secret. He says, no, I don't know any secret. Then why should he give you the ring? Driki asked. I myself gave you a white arrow. The ancestors have made for us a strange road indeed. So they set forward by the Dimmerskog, and they're close to Ermsheim. And Benedict sees fellow trolls, fellow Ekenuk, and Benedict tells them that shouts to them that they're off to go to Ermsheim. One gave the sign to ward off evil, the other was using a charm against madmen. So they finally leave the horses, and Driki notes that everything north of the mountains was ceded to the Norns long ago at the time of the parting. And they have spike-covered metal plates with straps and buckles, and they have harnesses and ice axes of the whole 9 yards. And Simon, for pretty much the first time, kind of realizes the mortality of what they're doing. It's not going to be a simple hike. They could die trying to climb this mountain. It says, the White Tower again loomed in his dreams that night. He clung desperately to its blood-slickened sides as wolves howled below him, and a dark red-eyed shape rang the baleful bells above. We then go to Isgrimner, who is in disguise as an Adenite monk, and a tavern master tells him, and this is in Hernastir, that he saw Kadrak and Miriamel 2 or 3 days ago. And then we go to Kadrak and Miriamel. Miriamel is being disguised as a boy, again using the name Malachias, as they are setting sail from the harbor town. And she says, why did you come with me? There's something I still do not understand. The monk did not look up. I came because the lady paid me. There's nothing like the ocean to remind you of what is important. And Kadrak says, but by the good Lord, that's true. I'm reminded that life is sweet, that the sea is treacherous, and that I am a fool. Miriamel nodded solemnly, staring up at the bellying sails. Those are good things to remember, she said. So that is the end of chapter 41. So we are left now with just 3 chapters left. And tomorrow, should it be a normal day like any others, we will get a video up here that has the final 3 chapters, and it's roughly the final 50 pages of the book. So we're gonna get the last 3 chapters done, and tomorrow we will conclude this first step in the Osten Ard reread or read along. And then on Wednesday, immediately after, because this trilogy flows one into the next, then Wednesday we will start and read the prologue and the first chapter of Stone of Farewell. So, chapters 40 and 41, let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time.